Is AI going to replace accessibility testers and developers?
I do not think so. I do not think so.
What does a truly inclusive AI future looks like to you?
Unfortunately, it might take some accessibility off of another area.
If there is one thing, Shannon, you would love our listeners to walk away with, what would that be?
You know, the saying gets used a lot, but your network is your net worth.
Hi, welcome to the very first episode of Access Unlocked. I'm your host, Param Singh, and I couldn't be more excited to launch this podcast by spotlighting leaders and impact makers who are shaping the future of accessibility, be it through technology, advocacy, or leadership. This podcast series is for anyone who has ever wondered, how can I break into accessibility? How can I turn my passion for inclusion into a career? Where does AI fit into all of this? If that sounds like you, you're at the right place. I first met today's guest at the Disability in Conference, and I was deeply moved by her vision. She spoke about Microsoft's Copilot and the role AI can play in building a more inclusive world. Not someday, but right now. Her words stayed with me, and I knew she had to be the voice that kicks off this series. She's the America's lead for Microsoft's Disability Employee Resource Group, a senior healthcare partner development manager, and holds a BA in Disability Studies and a Doctor of Behavioral Health. She currently serves on the boards of March of Dimes and Hope House. But before we dive into today's conversation, I have a small ask to subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button and share this video with a friend or a colleague because it will enable me to bring more amazing leaders to the show. And as you're listening, I would love to know what's one thing Shannon says that really resonates with you. Drop it in the comments. I read every single comment. Thank you so much for being here today, Shannon. I'm honored to have you as the very first guest. But before we dive in, I have to say, our Instagram community loved your red outfit at the Disability in Conference.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, with that, Shannon, let's start from the beginning. You have worked directly with the disability in community before even entering technology. What
Yeah.
motivated you to work in the disability in community?
Well, that's kind of a long story, but I'll try to keep it as short as I possibly can. So my father was just diagnosed with schizophrenia when I was fairly young. He had a fairly high up job, and he started sleeping a lot, and he started missing work. And he then ended up getting diagnosis of schizophrenia. And it was, it was really unfair how he was treated, back over 30 years ago. We didn't have disability leave. We didn't have the disability support in corporations that we have today. And he got fired. And I just didn't think it was fair. So I started working with the disability community at a really young age. I started doing volunteer work in our special ed class, as it was called at the time. And then when it came time to looking to go to university, and by the way, I'm Canadian, so I say university, my mother said, you really love working with persons with disabilities. Why don't you look at doing that for school? And I thought about where the field was at the time, and I thought, well, I don't want to be stuck working in a group home for the rest of my life. And she said, well, you could take that knowledge and you can really do whatever you want with it. So, if it's something that you're passionate about learning about, maybe it's something that you should try going and learning and seeing what you could do with that and how you can morph it into something else. So I ended up going to college at Centennial College in Toronto for developmental services because at the time there were no bachelor's degrees of disability studies in Canada. And then when I ended up graduating, they ended up opening up at formerly known as Ryerson University, a disability studies program. So I ended up bridging my diploma of developmental services into a BA of disability studies. And I was in the field, and I ended up doing my university thesis project on accessible programming. And at the time, there was no TV shows that highlighted or even talked about the disability community. So I ended up putting a pitch to Cable 10, Rogers Community Access in Toronto, and I gave them a pitch for me hosting and producing a show called Accessibility Toronto, and they picked it up. But they picked it up as just little kind of commercials, little micro shows within commercial breaks. So I started preparing those segments and did that for a little while, and then our show kind of had its time. But many years later, I put in the same proposal at the same station, and I ended up getting some funding for a more robust TV show. Okay. So on top of that, I ended up hosting and producing a show called Accessibility Toronto, and I worked in the field with persons with disabilities in group homes as a job coach, and in independent living for quite some time before I came into tech.
Yeah, I can completely resonate with the story that you begin with somebody in your family having some type of challenge and there was no support provided, Shannon. I do have someone in my family who's having issues sleeping. Like, you will find them sleeping most of the time. So I believe he's also suffering from same type of problem. But yeah, that's really powerful, Shannon, that you ended up hosting a series of sessions or podcast with your station, right? And from that point onwards, Shannon, you went on to the study for disability studies, right? And behavioral health. So how did that shape your lens on inclusion and access?
Well, it's funny. So I didn't want to talk too much on my last story because I could talk on forever, but I did end up getting my doctorate in behavioral health, which is a huge passion of mine. Um, when I first started off doing my diploma in developmental services, I had this mind frame that I was going to change the world, and everything that I learned in school was the book of law. And I started working in the field, and I ended up working in at the time a special ed class with this young teen named Nafisa. And she really actually changed my view on the field. She really wanted to join the home economics class, but she couldn't because she was in the special ed class, right? And they had their own curriculum, and they weren't integrating people with disabilities into the class. I said, "Hey, Nafisa, why don't we kind of put together a plan and approach the principal and see what he says, and try to get you into this class because this is something that you really enjoy." And she said, "Well, Shannon, I can't." And I said, "Well, why not?" And she goes, "Because I'm retarded." And I said, "Nafisa, don't call yourself that. Don't call yourself that. That's definitely a label that we never approved of in going to school for developmental services and my bachelor's of disability studies." And I said, "Look, you're someone who has a developmental disability. You're always trained in school. You acknowledge the person before you insert any disability, right?" And she said, "Shannon, it's all the same thing, really. And I mean, if I say I'm retarded, who are you to say that I'm not?" And I pushed back, and I thought, who am I to tell you how you identify yourself? You want to call yourself whoever or whatever you want to call yourself. You should be empowered to say that, and it shouldn't be me on my freshly post-university disability study education to tell you you're not. And we had these classes in school. They were called labels, and we learned all about labels are for jars, not for people. But yet we had these labels for people that were just different labels than the labels 10 years before, right? And so it was interesting when I went to school for disability studies. I kind of came out in the field and scrapped a lot of what I learned and took on the just the theory, and not even a theory, just my belief of treat people how you want to be treated, treat people the way they want to be treated, and don't tell people how they want to be treated. Ask people how they want to be treated, because everybody has a different viewpoint and a different feeling of what they want and how they want to be treated. And simply asking somebody can really open up the path for inclusion for that person on how they see accessibility and inclusion, and not how you see it.
Absolutely. I think that's the right way, and it's a good segue, and it's a good insight for our viewers, right? That you have to ask how other wants to be treated and not make any assumptions. So Shannon, is it safe to say that was the defining moment for you that made you realize that accessibility or inclusion was going to be your life's work?
I think that I don't know if I ever knew it was going to be a life work, actually. It was something that I always enjoyed, and I always had a passion for it, and it always stayed a consistency in my life. Early on in my career, I had times of thinking about getting out of it. And that was because back some time ago, back 20 years ago, when you worked in the field of disability, there really was only working in group homes, right? There wasn't this. There wasn't accessibility in corporations. There really wasn't much outside of just working in a group home. And unfortunately, when you're working in the group home, the group home area, you are working for a company and you're following the rules of that company. And if you don't believe in the rules of that company, well, it sometimes sucks to be you. You have to follow the rules, right? And you might not always agree with the rules of the organization, but unless you're on the board, you can't make a change, right? So there were times when I worked in the field that I felt a bit defeated. A bit defeated in the sense where, I don't agree with giving people with developmental disabilities carte blanche psychiatric medications or birth control medications, right? I believe in the individual, no matter who you are, having a say in their own health and well-being. And back at the time, the views were a little bit different, and thankfully they're always changing and progressing. But there were times that I felt discouraged, and I maybe pulled out of the field a little bit more and came back and pulled out and came more. But the way that I kind of had my perseverance through the field of disability and accessibility, I'm kind of grouping them into one here, is by having the ability to have my own voice in inclusion. So having my TV show, having the ability to have my own platform and work with people that I really respected in the field, and bring them on the show so we can host our own voice rather than following the voice that we felt was guiding us at the time, or sometimes restricting us.
Absolutely, Shannon. I believe the advocacy fatigue is for real, and that's where you might have felt discouraged at times, right? We also face the same challenge working in the field. But then comes your transition from healthcare and advocacy into tech. I know many of our listeners, they wonder, can I make that jump too? So how did that transition happen for you, Shannon?
Oh, so this is kind of a funny story, and I love talking about it, but I don't talk about it very often. So I was working at Salvation Army Social Services in their group homes over in Toronto, for anybody who might know Broadview Village. And when I started working there, we had desktop computers, so it was a while ago, and there were all these boxes that were sitting in the group homes, just these brand new boxes. And I asked one of the staff, I said, what's that over there? She goes, oh, that's our new desktop computer. And I went, well, what's it doing in a box? She goes, well, nobody knows how to work it. Nobody knows how to, work the computer. And I said, well, it's pretty simple. All you do is you open it up and you put a CD-ROM in it and it starts, downloading programs and it works itself. And I wasn't that technical at the time, but my bachelor's degree, part of it was starting to go online and we were doing the turn in assignments online. So I knew enough and I was fairly young. And she said, well, if you want to set it up, feel free. And so I set it up and then I got asked by another group home to set up their computer and set up their computer. And then I started moving some of our manual sheets onto Excel spreadsheets, our medication tracking sheets. And I became the unofficial tech person for the group homes. Back then we didn't have a tech person because things weren't very tech. And I started, liking technology and was like, oh, well, I could do this. And then my schedule at the time, it was a lot of shift work. I was working evenings and weekends, and I really wanted to do some more education, and I couldn't do it with working in the field with my schedule. So I realized I kind of need to move up to pursue more education. So I started putting my resume out there to companies that had health technology, because that was kind of the most relevant or, relevant to my field at the time. And my first job was actually working in sales at Recall, which Recall got absorbed by Iron Mountain, and I was selling paper shredding services. And after 6 months in the job, they ended up amalgamating all the lines. So I ended up selling disaster recovery, which at the time was tape storage, taking tape stored in the room. And that was big tech. That was big tech 20 years ago.
Yeah. For our audience, Shannon, not to reveal our age, but most of our audience might not be aware of what CD-ROM is. So if you don't know, go and use Copilot to see what that CD-ROM looks like. But yeah, that's inspiring, Shannon, where you started and where you are right now with Microsoft. So let's talk about Microsoft Disability ERG, or Employee Resource Group. You lead the Americas chapter there, and that's incredible. So what kind of work does that involve from day to day? If you can give us some sneak peek into your work.
Yeah, so we obviously, so as the name kind of says it, we're a resource for the employees. We're we're kind of what I think of in my own mind, a safe third party. So, if anybody wants help with accommodations, I frequently help employees with linking them up with the accommodations group and answering questions and being that extra resource there for them. If our employees are voicing up that they want to have a greater focus on career development for the disability community at Microsoft, we will help deliver those programs for them. For example, career development in our last FY, which was FY25. Microsoft starts their new year in July. There was a lot of feedback that people wanted to focus on career development. So in the disability ERG, we have our passion hats, and my passion hat, I ended up taking on career development for the ERG. So I helped lead our career jams for persons with disabilities app, which was matching persons with disabilities or people who identify as having a disability at Microsoft with mentors at Microsoft who either identify as being an ally or identify as having a disability themselves. Match those people up so it's more of a safe space to talk about career development. We had over 750 sessions at Microsoft and in the mentoring program because of the launch of career jams for people with disabilities. I also ended up heading up our leadership career fireside chats, which focused on leaders at Microsoft, all in C-level positions, mostly CVPs at Microsoft, who identify as having a disability and how they went through career growth in general and also at their career at Microsoft, and recommendations and advice that they have for the community at Microsoft. And they're hour sessions and they're open. People can answer questions. It's a free space for people to talk to our senior level leaders. And, really the premise of that was when you have a disability, sometimes you have that feeling where you think, maybe I can't get into that role because of my disability, or maybe I need some time off work, or I need certain accommodations, right? No matter if you have a disability or not, sometimes we're all our worst critic. And so listening to leaders at Microsoft who can just say, hey, you know what? I've been there too. And this is how it happened for me. And you could do it too. Because really, we need to be better represented in leadership. The disability community needs to be better represented. And the way by doing that is to equally move persons with disabilities into leadership roles, and also people talking about their disabilities openly and demystifying disability out there, right? Because a lot of people listening to this podcast may encounter having a disability in their life if they don't have one currently.
Absolutely, Shannon. So this is what I truly believe. Once you provide a safe space to people with disabilities and an equitable opportunity, they have what it takes to exceed at all levels. And this is what I'm continuously learning by visiting or being part of the disability in community. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Shannon, at Microsoft, I know there are a lot of projects that you work with. Can you pinpoint one project that you are proud of? I know it's a tough question, but I would let you give it a shot.
The one that I was just talking about, the career leadership fireside chats, just the feedback I got back from it, people who said that they always held themselves back from moving into leadership roles at Microsoft because they were afraid that their disability might hold them back or it might expose them more. And not everybody feels comfortable to disclose, and that's okay. You don't have to disclose if you don't want to, but some people feel like if they move up, it will put them in the spotlight. And hearing our leadership team talk very openly and being vulnerable about how they disclosed and how they ended up working their calendar to maybe have breaks throughout the day, or drawing those boundaries, right? Where they say, no, I can't do this after 4 p.m. because I'm exhausted and I need time to decompress, right? So having the community come back and say, that was really inspiring to hear hearing that CVP talk about their autoimmune disorder or Parkinson's um, made me realize that I could also move up too, and I don't need to be I don't need to be afraid.
Right, right, absolutely. So, Shannon, if I may have to transition a little bit, right? Most of the organizations they struggle with accessibility, be it the accessibility in general or digital accessibility. So, how do you see this space evolving, and what are the things that companies are still getting it wrong?
Well, digital accessibility, even accessibility, it's all really new when we think about it, right? I talk about 20 years ago where this 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 space did not exist in the corporate space, and we're all still learning. So, AI is really new, and right now, AI is almost a fashion term. There's a quote from Larry Ellison from probably about, at least 20 years ago when everybody was talking about cloud. Cloud 20 years ago is what the term of AI right now is, right? Because cloud was the fashion term back 20 years ago. He said, cloud's a fancy word to just talk about what we've always been doing, right? Because cloud was basically just storing your data in somebody else's data center. Right. I kind of feel the same thing with AI, right? We have such a huge umbrella and we've been using it a lot longer than people think. But we have this big umbrella term and it's constantly expanding and it's constantly changing. AI is going to be used a lot more in the accessibility field. And, when we think about something like Copilot, which is still very, very new for all of us, that has made such a huge impact on the accessibility field. Being able to, for somebody who's neurodiverse, not even neurodiverse, somebody who has a disability where you can record your meetings and have the transcript on and have it be you know fully acceptable to do so, not even talking about just in the disability field, but just so you can have a free flowing conversation. You can focus on the person you're talking to rather than taking notes. That is a complete game changer. And that's something that we've only been using for very recent, right? Um, Being able to plop images into your teams and have people who are low vision being able to leverage AI to describe what's in the images. Right. There's so much stuff that's going to come out that's going to revolutionize accessibility and make things more accessible for not just the disability community, but for everybody. It's interesting to think accessibility isn't just for the disability community. Accessibility is for everybody. Yes. Absolutely. Thank you so much for those thoughts, Shannon. So many of our viewers watching this podcast, Shannon, want to enter into accessibility, be it digital accessibility or be it accessibility in general. What advice would you give someone who's just starting out? My, you know, my advice would, first off, it's who you know and it's being connected, right? There are some amazing conferences out there, and there's a lot of them. You would, I think I've been in the field for over 20 years now that I know all the conferences, but there's always new ones popping up. So keep an eye on the conferences that are popping up in accessibility in your town. There's Disability Inn that just happened a couple of weeks ago in Florida, and it rotates over to Las Vegas. Behavioral health tech is happening here in San Diego, and I'm going to attend that in November. I'm also going to be a speaker if anybody's going to be in San Diego in November. There's tons of conferences out there. There's ones that are specific to neurodiversity. There's ones that are specific to developmental disability. Ones that are specific to specific areas like Parkinson's or cancer. So, find your niche, find what you're interested in, start networking at these conferences, start networking in communities, find neurodiversity communities, find accessibility communities, and join local meetups. Reach out to people in accessibility at these companies that you want to work at and talk to them and find out how they got into their roles. Look at their LinkedIn, look at the steps that they made to get in their field. And, I also believe in niches, right? If your area in accessibility, you want to focus on UX design and accessibility, you want to focus on software development accessibility, lean in on your niche, lean in on where your passion is, and follow that through and find your community.
Yep, absolutely. I believe skills along with curiosity can take you such a long way, right? So,
Yeah.
Shannon, in case someone who is already into the field, this is taking the step further, right? What do you think makes someone great in this field? Even if they have the same skill set, how can they be more impactful?
Good question. Being more impactful, I would say if you're in a company that has a disability ERG, lean into that ERG. The most critical way that I feel like we are impactful in the ERG is listening and learning. Listen to what people want, listen to what people need, listen to what the community is asking for, and act on that. So if you are in software development, you're in UX, you're in accessibility, and you're at a company, you have your local ERG, lean in, ask those ERGs, hey, what are people saying about our products? What do people want? What don't they want? Where can I help? And where can I take the voice of the community and put that back into our software and be that kind of helpful bridge? That would really help amplify your brand in your company. And that can really get you deeper linked with the disability community at your company, but also the accessibility team at your company. Absolutely. I believe getting connected with the ERG, be it your company or outside of your company, gives you the insight to connect with real people with disabilities. Because at the end of the day, Shannon, we are all building for them, right? If you interact with them, you have the opportunity to get a live feedback. There's nothing like it. Yeah, exactly. So, Shannon, how can someone with no formal background in disability studies like you have still contribute meaningfully? Are there any particular roles or specialties where accessibility field really needs more people? If you have no experience at all, I think that's fine. It's interesting when you look at who leads accessibility at Salesforce and a lot of these big companies. These people do not have a disability background, but what they do have is a passion for the field, and they started typically with engaging with their disability ERGs. So, my suggestion again would be to get in with your disability ERG, look at your local community around you. Where can you volunteer? Where can you get engaged in different boards? Join a volunteer board in accessibility and disability in your community, and begin growing your network and your knowledge and your expertise from there. And sometimes having that practical experience will outweigh having the textbook experience any day. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for that input, Shannon. Now let's change our gears a little bit and talk about the most hot topic of today, and that's AI, right? Yeah. Where we are all headed. Either you like it or you hate it, but that's the future. So, Shannon, what excites you the most about the potential of AI in accessibility? Yeah, just how AI can really help bring inclusion. Inclusion of everybody, really. How I was talking about before, where Copilot, you can transcribe your meeting and you can ask it questions, right?
Yes.
That automatically brings so much inclusion of not just persons with disabilities, but everybody together, right? When we make things accessible, we promote inclusion for everybody. And with the tools that are coming out and things that are happening with Chat GPT, with Copilot, with all the AI tools out there that we use on a daily basis, we're just going to see the AI field just consistently grow and offer so many more tools that we don't even know of today to promote inclusion accessibility, but they're not even going to be labeled as promoting accessibility and inclusion. They're just going to be tools that help improve our daily tasks, like Copilot, that are going to start building into our workflow, that are automatically going to bring inclusion without us even talking about accessibility, which is going to be really key, right? When we start improving workflows and making things accessible, it just makes things accessible for everybody.
Yep, yep. I love Teams real-time captioning feature that gives me so much freedom of not to take notes and just refer to them once the meeting is over. That gives me full attention to the meeting itself and not worried about scribing every time.
Right. And that's what I talked about when I was presenting at Disability. And a huge thing for me with Teams was you can't focus on both. You're either sitting there doing your notes and focusing on writing your notes, and you realize, okay, my handwriting is absolutely horrible, and I can't dictate absolutely everything, right? I can't write that fast, so I end up having these notes that half the time are absolute gibberish.
Right.
But when I turn on Teams, I could fully focus on my meeting with the person I'm talking to, and I could be fully engaged. And even if I forget something that we talked about, or even if I ended up, I picked up my phone and I ended up getting sidetracked, I can still go into my Teams and ask questions to Copilot and figure out what happened. I could get a good synopsis, takeaways, and I could be fully prepared for my next meeting, which is amazing and invaluable.
Absolutely, Shannon. And this is where my next question is. We both know AI is going to be revolutionary, right? The biggest question that I get from my community, especially who are just entering the field, is AI going to replace accessibility testers and developers?
I do not think so. I do not think so. What we're leveraging AI for is a second set of eyes in the field. So if I go back to a use case that's currently happening, radiology imaging. So when you have a radiology image and you see potential cancer or tumor in a radiology image, AI can pick up that tumor, that cancer in that radiology image, but we're not going to fully just trust AI. We're going to take AI and also a human being to review that image. So before we had two radiologists looking over that image. Today, we can have AI look over the image and also have a radiologist look over the image. But we're not going to replace the human being, or at least I don't see replacing the human being. I see it as a second set of eyes for verification, where in the past we used two sets of eyes. We can now use AI as that second set of eyes.
So it's like AI with human in the center.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. Let's take that further, Shannon. I know we have already talked about how AI can help people with disabilities. Are there any specific tools that you can point out that can help people with disabilities?
Oh, well, there's tons out there. There's some great apps for people with ADHD to help with their calendaring and tracking and keeping notes. There is, one thing that I love doing is putting everything through Copilot, taking all my main synopses and putting into notes, putting into our office notes, and having clear tabs of all of my meetings with my clients so I could automatically populate everything from there and have access to that for my future meetings. Seeing AI is another great Microsoft tool. If you don't know it, Seeing AI helps people who are low vision visualize the world around them through their glasses, being able to pick out an image and saying, the person you see in front of you is a tall woman with blonde hair wearing a pink sweater. What you see in front of you is a menu, and this is what the menu says. That's an amazing tool. There's thousands of applications out there. And if anybody has any questions about any applications, please feel free to reach out to me. I can give some specific suggestions, but there are too many to mention, and there's going to be tons more, which is really exciting.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that they can reach out to you. I'll share your LinkedIn profile in our descriptions.
Thank you.
And Shannon, I believe, yes, Microsoft is among the leaders in the space. So if you would have to design the future for yourself, what does a truly inclusive AI future looks like to you?
Well, and this is interesting because where we kind of sit right now is sometimes when you're trying to make things accessible for one area, unfortunately, it might take some accessibility off of another area, right? So you might be bolding colors or text for accessibility in one area, but having that boldness might be hard for some other people to read. So it ends up becoming this balancing act where in accessibility we haven't fully figured out yet. And I know that area because my husband's in UX design. He constantly tells me about the challenges that he has in accessibility design because it's really hard to make everything truly accessible. We don't yet have that. We don't yet have that space where we can make everything truly accessible. But with the tools out there, maybe we can, and maybe we will have a future of making websites, making UX design fully accessible. And that's kind of what I see for the future. We're still very preliminary in accessibility and accessibility design and inclusion. And it's a field, like I said, 20 years ago, it wasn't even a topic. So much is going to happen over the next year or two or three. Areas that we thought in inclusive design are going to come out and we won't even realize it's a current issue. It'll just be something that becomes mainstay in accessibility and how we design future programs. I believe that's the future worth building, Shannon, wherein everyone is included. Yeah. Okay, the last segment that we have for this podcast, Shannon, is talking about your impact and the nonprofit work that you do. So you are deeply involved outside of technology as the board of March of Dimes and Hope House. And I'll be very honest with you, I got to know about it after meeting with you. Okay. So I'm genuinely moved by how it is committed to improving the health of moms and babies and helping people with multiple disabilities. Yeah. I believe it's such an important work. So I'll be sharing the links in our descriptions for our audience to explore and support their mission. Thank you. Of course. Anything that you would like to share, like how does your role complement or deepen your work in accessibility as being as a member of that board? Yeah, so those two, March of Dimes and Hope House are my passion projects. Hope House is in LA County, and they provide residences for persons with developmental disabilities and physical disabilities. Um, Being somebody who works in a unique space and also works in the ERG, I feel like on the board I can give a unique perspective. Also, coming from the corporate space, which is a bit of a different role than other people uh, in the board, I also can lend a lens to platforms that companies can use for fundraising. So at Microsoft, as a Microsoft employee, we have a tool called Benvity that we use at Microsoft. And Microsoft is awesome enough where they put in a pool of money that they will uh, donate dollars for time that employees volunteer on these boards and at these places to volunteer. So Microsoft turns the hours that I volunteer on these boards into donations to March of Dimes and also to Hope House, which is great for giving back. It also allows me to take that knowledge and let Hope House and March of Dimes know how they can solicit further funds from people who work at organizations who can leverage tools like Benvity, which is a really interesting eye that's a little different from some of the people who work on these boards. March of Dimes, on the flip side, um, helps improve health for mothers and babies who are preterm. So babies who are preterm, and that's something that I'm very passionate about as well, and also lends into the disability area because children who are born preterm, have a higher instance of potentially having a disability. So if anybody has any questions about either Hope House or March of Dimes, very passionate about those organizations, and we're looking for volunteers at both Hope House and March of Dimes. So please feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in volunteering.
Of course. Thank you so much, Shannon. Thank you for sharing that with such honesty. Before we wrap up, if there is one thing, Shannon, you would love our listeners to walk away with, what would that be?
Well, the saying gets used a lot, but your network is your net worth. Um, if you are looking to grow in the accessibility field, go out there and meet people, go out there and network. Don't be afraid of reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn and saying, "Hi, this is what I'm interested in doing, and I am really passionate about how you pursued your career." People don't seem to do that as much anymore. And believe me, you might have a couple people who won't respond back. You might have some people who will say no, but most people like helping. And you'll be surprised how many people out there are willing to help. So grow your network, grow your knowledge base. You don't have to have a bachelor's in disability studies. You don't have to have a master's in computer science. You can really come from any background. And if you look at Jenny Lay's background from Microsoft, she went to school for music. You look at the chief accessibility person from Salesforce. I know she has a totally different background as well. Don't let that intimidate you. Go out there, pursue your passion, network with people, get involved with your disability ERGs, get involved in local community organizations, and go to conferences. There's lots of student badges for these conferences. Even if the conferences are expensive, there's lots of events that happen around the conference. So just get out there and network and learn. It's really the best thing you could do for your career. Yeah, thank you so much, Shannon. With that, I will drop the links of all the people that you mentioned in our description. I hope
Awesome.
they're all as accessible as you are. I'm accessible to anybody, so please feel free to drop me a line. I love meeting people, and if there's any way that I can help you or your community, please let me know. Uh, I I worked in the field. I'm a helper, so I love helping people.
Yep, yep. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story and insights with honesty. It's clear that you're not just leading accessibility. I know you're wearing that t-shirt which says accessibility. You are living it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you bringing me here.
Absolutely. Thank you. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend. Leave us a review and most importantly, keep learning, keep building, and keep including. I'll see you in the next episode of Access Unlocked. This is Param Singh signing off.